Hello adventurers, and welcome back to another episode of Underdark Cellars. Today we are making Pike's Purple Jewel Cake of Marquet. Let's dive right in and get started. While the oven is preheating to 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 175 degrees Celsius, we are going to grind our freeze-dried blueberries to a fine powder. This took me approximately 30 seconds with my food processor. After that's done, we are going to pass it through a fine mesh sieve into a bowl to strain out any chunks that were not pulverized by our food processor. We are going to manually grind that with a mortar and pestle afterwards, just to make sure we get as much blueberry in the loaf as possible. I did this in sections until everything was completely pulverized, and then we're going to transfer this to a larger bowl to prep our dry ingredients. In the larger bowl, we're going to add our blueberry powder, the all-purpose flour, our baking powder, and our kosher salt, and we're going to gently mix this together until everything is evenly combined and no streaks of blueberry remain. Next, we are going to prep our egg whites. If you've never separated egg yolks and egg whites before, it's quite simple. Just crack your egg, and then you're going to pass it between your hands using your fingers to essentially strain out the egg white from the yolk. And then we're going to set those aside. Next, we're going to work on our butter and sugar base for our wet ingredients. So we're going to whip a half cup of unsalted butter until it's light and fluffy, and then we're going to add 3/4 cup of granulated sugar and mix that together until everything is evenly combined and still fluffy. And then we're going to slowly add in our egg whites. I did about a half at a time, and we're just going to make sure this is a nice even mix that's nice and fluffy but doesn't have really any chunks of butter or sugar. Then we're going to start slowly incorporating our dry ingredients 1/3 at a time. I'm doing this in batches and just making sure everything is just integrated with my spatula. I don't want any real gluten development with this cake, because that's what it is. We want a nice and fluffy cake. We don't want something that's really chewy. So once the first 2/3 are mixed in, I'm going to put in the dry stuff for the last third, and then I'm going to add the applesauce and the vanilla extract. I am using 3/4 cup of unsweetened applesauce and a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Now we're just going to make sure everything is completely integrated, scraping down the sides occasionally, and then we're going to set that aside and prep our pan. I'm using a standard loaf pan. I'm using some non-stick avocado oil spray to hold the parchment paper down, because we're going to use the parchment paper to lift the loaf out of the pan later. So I'm making sure that there's about 1.5 inches on either side so that my hands can grasp it and not burn myself on the pan. And then we're just gonna load this in there. Then we're going to spread this in the loaf pan, and I didn't catch this on video because I actually forgot, but we're going to want to sprinkle some sparkling sugar. I used turbinado sugar on top of the loaf before we bake it for 50 minutes, double checking that it's done when a skewer comes out dry, and then let it sit for about 10 minutes before we remove it from the pan. I'm just running a knife along the short sides to make sure it doesn't stick. And then we're going to let this rest on a wire rack for anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, just to make sure it's nice and cool. Then it's time to slice. Make sure you peel the parchment paper away first, because you don't want to eat that. Don't eat that. I'm using a serrated blade because in my head this is a loaf, but in retrospect I probably should have used a regular blade. But oh my goodness, look at that pretty cross section. She's gorgeous. Time for a taste test. And it is delicious, guys. This was so fun and easy to make, but let's go ahead and move into final thoughts. First things first, this cake was so tender. The texture was springy and pillowy. It was moist. It was delicious. Second is 2 parts. One, the cake wasn't super sweet, which was really, really nice. It had a nice blueberry flavor, which I think was due to the dried blueberries. I feel like if I had used like fresh blueberries, this would have been too sweet, if that makes sense. I feel like the dried blueberries like lent it a more delicate flavor, and it would have been overwhelmingly blueberry if I had used fresh blueberries. Third, comment I have is about the sparkling sugar, or in my case turbinado sugar, because I did not have sparkling sugar. I feel like it was more for aesthetic appearances rather than really adding anything. So you could use it, you could go without it. I don't see it turning out poorly if you don't use the sparkling or turbinado sugar. Now, on the back of that comment, I think what they're going for with the aesthetic is kind of like an amethyst geode situation. So if I were to replace the topping with a glaze, it wouldn't turn out the same aesthetically, but I feel like the flavor would be really, really nice if you had a nice lemon, like royal icing glaze kind of on top of this. I personally really like lemon and blueberry as a pairing. If you want to integrate some more of that like purpley color, you could throw in some lavender. I feel like that would be really nice. But I think I would swap out the sugar for a glaze if I'm doing this for the cake alone. Last but certainly not least, I feel like this cake has a lot of potential for creativity. So we're dealing with a purple jewel cake. We're getting this purple color and the flavor from the blueberries. I wonder what would happen if you change this to freeze-dried strawberries, freeze-dried peaches, freeze-dried kiwi, change the type of the fruit, you change the color of the cake, you could have like a rainbow assortment of jewel cakes, which I feel like would be really cool. So maybe I'll try that one of these days and I'll let y'all know in like a YouTube short. But overall, I'd rate this a solid 8.5 to 9 out of 10. I think the only thing against it is I just don't eat cake all that often. I would definitely make this again if someone requested it though, and maybe I'll make this for a special occasion, maybe change things up a bit, do a layer cake. Anyway, that brings us to the end of this week's episode. Thank you so much, adventurers, for watching. If you liked what you saw, please smash that like button. Please leave a comment down below if you have any questions or comments. I'm happy to answer and respond as best I can. And if you are not subscribed, please subscribe. We do all things food and fantasy here at Underdark Cellars, and we would love to have you. And if you do subscribe, ring that bell for notifications so you are notified when new videos go live. Again, we are uploading now twice a week, so look forward to another video this week. And with that said, thank you so much, adventurers. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.